Hello and welcome to Pleasure Reading. I'm your host, Amelia Ruby, and this is a podcast about the pleasure of reading, where I share curated reading lists, author rankings, chats with my bookish friends, and more. If you too take pleasure in reading, I hope that you will subscribe and share this show with a friend. Cheers to your next best book. Hello and welcome to the very first episode of Pleasure Reading. I'm Amelia Ruby, your fellow reader, book lover, and host of this new podcast. Thank you so much for tuning in. For this first episode, I wanted to begin with a curated book list that collects all of the things that I have been reading about #girlboss influencers over the past few years. Obviously, the rise and fall of the quote-unquote girl boss has been highly documented by our media. First, through the success of CEOs like Sophia Amoruso of Nasty Gal or Audrey Gelman of The Wing. There was this whole rise in the late 2010s and even into 2020 of women who were running fast-growing VC-funded companies, particularly in the spaces of wellness and lifestyle. Sophia Amoruso herself even coined the term girl boss by writing a memoir of the same name. And then we saw kind of starting in 2020, there were these public critiques of these women. They were often removed from their positions as CEOs of their companies. And some of those companies are still around and doing well. And others like The Wing have shut down and are no longer operational, at least in the same sense as they were at the height of their popularity. So as a business owner myself, and as someone who, full disclosure, did join The Wing for a year in Chicago in, that must have been like 2018 now, I have always been fascinated by the role of the girl boss, both in like an intriguing, alluring way and in a totally repulsive, critical way. And I think that tension is really what led me into reading a lot of books about #girlboss influencers over the past few years. So in this episode, I have collected 10 books about girl boss influencers, and let's go ahead and dive in to the books themselves. We're going to start with 4 fiction books on this theme, and then I will share a few nonfiction books as well as a little TBR. So we'll go from books I have read and enjoyed to books that I hope to read in the future. And hopefully you'll hear about some new reads or find some camaraderie about books you've already read along the way. The first book I want to talk about is Under the Influence by Noelle Crooks. This came out in August 2023, and it follows Harper Crews, who is a writer struggling to make it work in New York City. And after she loses her job in publishing, she applies for a new, very well-paid media role with an influencer and self-help icon named Charlotte Green. Now, Harper doesn't really know much about Charlotte. She was kind of like just online and submitted her resume haphazardly. But for some reason, Charlotte like hand selects Harper out of this pile of thousands of applications and chooses her for the job immediately, and then kind of pressures her to take it and to move to Nashville. Like, I think it's literally the next week, like as soon as physically possible. Nashville is Charlotte's home base, and when Harper moves there, she moves into what they call the greenhouse. Get it? Charlotte Green, the greenhouse, which is basically this compound where everyone who works for Charlotte lives. It's very much giving like Industrial Revolution. We live next to the factory, so we can always be on call to go in and work there. Like that's very much the vibe of what's happening at the greenhouse with Charlotte. And essentially the book unfolds from there. There are plenty of influencer shenanigans. There are missteps that Charlotte makes, ways that Harper tries to intervene in the situations to help Charlotte succeed. Harper comes to many of her own questions about what's actually going on here. And overall, I really enjoyed this story. I thought Harper was smart and funny. I thought Charlotte's character was the right blend of satire and over the top. But I will say I didn't necessarily love the ending. I really wanted this book to like take a stronger stance on some of the events that happened. I wanted it to have more of like a POV, a point of view on influencers more broadly. And I felt like it kind of just like wrapped up in a nice, neat little bow at the end. So overall, good read. I do recommend it, even if I thought it could have done a little bit more. And honestly, maybe I just thought that because the blurb for this book is that it's The Devil Wears Prada meets The Assistants. And I feel like The Devil Wears Prada has like a really strong point of view on media and fashion. And this book just kind of lacked that POV about influencers. So I'm going to give this like 3 out of 5 girl bosses, like on the scale from not at all a girl boss to totally giving me the girl boss iconic ick. We're going to go with 3 out of 5 girl bosses. Next up is A Special Place for Women by Laura Hankin. This book came out in May of 2022, and it is centered around Jillian Beckley. She is a New York City journalist, another NYC girl, who, in a moment of, let's call it career desperation, tells her editor that she has an in at this super exclusive women-only social club in the city. This club is very obviously the wing coded, like it is totally meant to have that vibe. They talk about how Rihanna's been there. They talk about how it costs $1,000 a month to join, which is like wild and definitely more than the wing cost when I joined in Chicago. But anyway, this club is full of influencers, celebrities, and definitely lots of girl boss characters, particularly the people who founded the club and are running it when our MC Jillian joins. So she gets herself invited into this club, but the deeper she gets in, the more she realizes that there might be something more magical and also potentially sinister happening there. I don't want to give anything else away, but I did think that this book was really fun. I loved the sort of like secret agent journalist setup that they had, because when she joins, she doesn't disclose that she's a journalist writing a piece about this club, right? She tells them she's like working on a book and she wants to be a member, but her goal is to do an expose. So I like that sort of setup. It like adds a nice narrative tension to the mix. And I really liked the very witchy themes that came in and how all of that played out, even bringing in some like family history stuff along the way. So I enjoyed this one. I would absolutely give it 4 out of 5 girl bosses, heavy on the witchy girl boss. From like soft girl to the bossiest girl, this one's pretty far up there. We had a lot of good girl boss potential in A Special Place for Women by Laura Hankin. Okay, my third book that I recommend about girl boss influencers is maybe my favorite of this list, or second favorite perhaps, but it's called Followers by Angelo. And this book came out in November 2020. I'm pretty sure that I got it at Costco like during the pandemic, and it was a real sleeper hit in my reading that year. This story is told in 2 timelines. We are in 2015-16 New York City and 2051 New York City, as well as 2051 Constellation, California. And Constellation, California is a closed California community where, this is on the back of the book, government-appointed celebrities live every moment of the day on camera. So we're definitely in this sort of like dystopian future where instead of influencers being just on our phones, like sharing at their will, they are appointed by the government and shared all the time. It's like basically like if all of life was Love Island. But in this book, the story is about Orla Cannon, who is a budding novelist. Are you noticing this trend? Like everybody's a writer and they are stuck in a dead-end job, as Orla is. And it's also about Floss, who is an influencer and a quote-unquote wannabe A-lister in the 2015 timeline. So Orla and Floss become friends, and that has all of these implications and things unfold. And then in the second timeline, we're following Marlo, who is one of those government-appointed celebrities in 2051, and she's going to go on this journey from Constellation to New York City. And I don't really want to say much else for fear of spoiling anything for you, but I will say that this book is giving Don't Worry, Darling. It's giving Stepford Wives. It's giving Love Island. And as I'm recording this, it is on Kindle Unlimited. So if that is your vibe, you can find it there. Highly recommend. This is a 4.5 out of 5 girl bosses for me, and I was super into it. My 5th fiction rec for our Girl Boss Influencer books is going to be Self-Care by Leigh Stein. So this came out in June 2020, and I will just say at the outset that I am a big fan of this book. It takes on all of the inconsistencies and hypocrisy of the wellness industry. It is full on satire. And after I read it, it was like one of those books that I was like pressing into the hands of my friends, being like, please read this, please read this. If I have ever been to a yoga class with you, I've probably mentioned this book. It is one of my favorite reads about influencers, hashtag girl bosses, wellness culture, etc. The story of the book is about this company called Ritual, Richual, which is intended to be the, quote, most inclusive online community platform for women to cultivate the practice of self-care and change the world by changing ourselves. But as you might expect, Ritual does not live up to that mission behind the scenes. And so the novel follows this cast of characters that includes Ritual COO Maren Gelb, her friend and Ritual CEO Devin Avery, Ritual employee Khadijah Walker, and others. And it's just a jolly good time, my friends. So if you love Reddit snark about influencers, or you're just into super smart satire of the quote unquote wealth and hellness world, this book is absolutely for you. I give it 5 out of 5 girl bosses. It is full on girl boss iconic ick. And I think that you'll love it. Okay, next up, I want to share 2 nonfiction books on our girl boss influencer theme. The first one is called Swipe Up for More, Inside the Unfiltered Lives of Influencers by Stephanie McNeal. This book came out in June 2023. And in it, journalist Stephanie McNeal takes this perspective of like, how have influencers shaped the lives of millennial women? And to do that, she speaks to 3 major influencers, Caitlin Covington, Myrna Valerio, and Shannon Bird. And those kind of cover the like fashion and lifestyle space, the running and fitness space, and the sort of like mommy blogging space. And so Stephanie does all these interviews with these kind of 3 iconic influencers and talks about how they have quote unquote built their empires. And in the process, like reflects on the role of the influencer in millennial culture. I thought this book was interesting. I would say it was definitely like a skim for me, primarily because it's really a book about influencers. And it doesn't quite take on that like girl boss lens of like, how do we uplift them and critique them at the same time? It's not really unraveling any of that. I think this book has a lot of empathy for influencers. It's really trying to make the case that like being an influencer is hard work, which I agree with. But I also wanted it to maybe kind of be open to like, yes, this is hard work, but maybe also there are some harms here that we should unpack and talk about. So Swipe Up for More got 2 out of 5 girl bosses from me. If you want to see more of the behind the scenes on influencer lifestyle, this is your book for sure. And my second nonfiction book pick for Girl Boss Influencer books is Glossy, Ambition, Beauty, and the Inside Story of Emily Weiss's Glossier by Marisa Meltzer. This came out in September 2023, and it is this behind-the-scenes look at the rise of Glossier and how Emily Weiss built this company. I thought it was really interesting how Marisa Meltzer charted the rise of the company, like looking at Emily's early entry and internships in the fashion world, how she started into the Gloss, the blog that became this like basically that all of this research and monetized content that then allowed her to launch Glossier and have it become the beauty brand that it has become over the past decade. I think that the book kind of reads like a really long New York Times profile, and I really felt like she was trying to stay like so clearly in her journalistic ethics, which I admire, and also like did not make for a lot of drama. So if you are wanting like behind the scenes drama, this is probably not your book. But if you, like me, are building your own business and you're just like really intrigued by how the sort of business and marketing of all of this worked, it definitely delivers on that. So I gave this book 3 out of 5 girl bosses. I think that it does do both the like uplifting the success of Emily Weiss and Glossier while also like critiquing some of the culture around that. And for me, that is like the hallmark of the girl boss concept. And it's what I like to see in all these books, right? So my favorites are the ones that manage to do both. They can uplift and celebrate while also being critical about both the like cultural milieu that this happens in and some of the questionable individual actors in these spaces. So that wraps the 6 books that I have read and recommend about girl boss influencers, particularly, I guess, New York City girl boss influencers, since that's where they're all based, which honestly might just be a bias of mine. I'm way more East Coast than West Coast in my own like personal taste. And so probably I just haven't read the West Coast influencer books yet. And as I wrapped up this episode, I just wanted to share 4 more books that are on my Girl Boss TBR and that I hope to read maybe in the upcoming months. So the first one is People Like Her by Ellery Lloyd. This came out in 2022, and from my understanding is a kind of psychological, suspenseful thriller about a mom who is also an influencer and the toll that that takes on her family, but also like maybe she's being stalked by somebody who's like looking at all her public content and like making her actually unsafe. Seems to be there in that description. So looking forward to more of a thriller in this vein. I feel like of the ones I've read, Followers kind of goes the most in that direction. Maybe a little bit A Special Place for Women has some like suspenseful moments, but this seems like solidly in the suspense category. So I really look forward to reading People Like Her by Ellery Lloyd. I also want to read their book, The Club, which I've heard good things about and have not read yet. So more books for my TBR. The second book on my Girl Boss TBR is 100 Other Girls by Iman Hariri-Kia. That came out in 2022. And that book is about Noura, an aspiring writer and amateur blogger in New York City. I bet you guessed it. And she spends her time tutoring rich Upper East Side kids before she lands this highly coveted job as the assistant to this iconic magazine editor. So in very like Devil Wears Prada style, that goes totally wrong. And we get to see how that unfolds alongside this sort of insider take on the media industry and friendship and what it means to chase your dreams. All this good stuff. Definitely looking forward to reading 100 Other Girls. The third book on my Girl Boss TBR is City of Likes by Jenny Mollen. This just came out in 2023. It's got a really cool cover with a bathtub full of bubbles on it. And here we're going back into the world of momfluencers, particularly through the lens of this woman named Megan, who is looking for a fresh start, moves her family to New York City, and befriends another woman named Daphne, who is a very well-known momfluencer, and starts like showering Megan with gifts and praise and prestige. And then as Megan starts to lose track of what may actually matter to her, we unravel what is perhaps really going on here. So that's City of Likes by Jenny Mollen. And the final book on my Girl Boss TBR is Such a Fun Age by Kiley Reid. This book is one that I can't believe I haven't read yet. It came out in 2020 and is very much along the themes of many of these other books. So Such a Fun Age is about Alex Chamberlain, who is a very successful woman, and her child's babysitter, Amira Tucker, takes Alex's child to the grocery store, and the store's security guard accuses Amira of having kidnapped the child because Amira is Black and the child is white, and the security guard is obviously racist. And after this happens, Alex resolves to like make things right. But this perhaps might be embroiled in white savior complex. And as the description says, both women find themselves on a crash course that will upend everything they think they know about themselves and each other. So I think that Such a Fun Age really brings the lens of race to these conversations. I should say that Alex, the wealthy white mom in this book, is the influencer. And so we really see how that role of public perception becomes a part of this story, from what I understand. And I think that I really got to read this. I need to put it at the top of my TBR so that I actually get to it, maybe even before the year's end. Okay, so those are my 10 books about girl boss influencers, which is both like a very specific category, and also there were so many other books I could have included here. So just to do a very brief recap, I have read and loved Under the Influence by Noelle Crooks, A Special Place for Women by Laura Hankin, Followers by Megan Angelo, Self-Care by Leigh Stein, Swipe Up for More by Stephanie McNeal, and Glossy by Marisa Meltzer. If I had to pick one of those books that I was like, go get this now, it would definitely be Self-Care by Leigh Stein. Again, just such a good satirical take on the wellness industry and how influencers sell us a lifestyle that is unattainable even for them. And then we also talked about my little baby girl boss TBR, which includes People Like Her by Ellery Lloyd, 100 Other Girls by Iman Hariri-Kia, A City of Likes by Jenny Mollen, and Such a Fun Age by Kiley Reid. All of those books are linked in the show notes, and I have used bookshop affiliate links, so if you hear about a book that you love here and you make a purchase with that link, I will receive a small affiliate payment. That is a little thank you for the book rec. I really appreciate you taking the time to listen to this episode and to join me at the very beginning of this show. For now, I will just say that it has been a pleasure reading with you. Here's to your next best book.